Hello students. Yes, so in this video I'll be explaining on the topic, very important topic, factors influencing dividend decision. Well, in my last two videos, I've explained on what this dividend decision is all about, right? How it is going to play a vital role, just like financing decision and investment decision. At this particular decision is also very very important, right? Because the investors, the shareholders, what they have invested, in form of equity shares or the preference shares, what they are going to receive, they are going to receive dividend. Whereas when it comes to the preference shareholders, they are liable to receive fixed rate of a dividend, whereas the actual owners, the equity shareholders, they are going to receive the dividend. It can be, it is not fixed in nature, but it all depends upon the profits what they are going to make. Again, always the first, when it comes to payment hierarchy, first the payment is given to the debenture holders, followed by preference shares, at last the equity shareholders, right? So now we shall understand what are the factors that which is going to influence at the time of making the dividend decision, how it is going to play a vital role in an organization, right? So we shall understand each point on a brief note. Fine. So the first point is stability of earnings. What does stability of earnings talk about? See, again, it is one of the important factors, that which is going to influence the dividend policy or the dividend decision, what the financial manager is going to make. See, if the earnings are relatively stable, like such companies, they are more likely to pay out a higher rate of dividend than a concern which deal in a necessities and they suffer less from fluctuating incomes, and than those of concern which deal with the luxurious goods. So stability of earnings is something that is very very important. You as a company, you as a financial manager, you have to analyze what is your stability of the earnings over a period of time. When you are able to make lots of profits, of course, what do you do with that? You are going to, you tend to pay the higher rate of dividend, right? Even the shareholders demand for it, right? You will have to take care of the retained earnings also. Just because you have gotten more money, whereas there's a cash inflow more, that doesn't mean you will have to end up paying the huge rate of dividend. You have to think about the retained earnings, you have to think about the future requirements, the risk, the uncertainty which is associated in the future. You never know, right? So all these are very very important. Again, if there's any kind of fluctuations or anything, right, you have to take care of all those things, because market is subjected to volatility. What is volatility? There's lots of fluctuation, right? You have certain factors like inflation, deflation, where there's a movement, lots of movement in the prices, and demand, supply, isn't it? All these are like uncontrollable in nature. They're systematic in nature, systematic risk. They are undiversifiable, right? So all these are really very very important, and the factor of stability of earnings is going to highly influence the dividend decision. Fine. So that's how the things are going to work here. The next step what you have is financing policy. Now, what does financing policy talk about? See, the dividend policy, it may be affected, or else it can be influenced, by the financing policy of the company. Now, what does a financing talk about? Financing is where I'm a company. I have lots of sources, in order to raise the capital what I require. So out of those multiple choices I have, I am going to choose according to my the nature of the organization, according to the size, the uh, size in the sense in terms of capital of my organization, right? So again, it is going to impact the dividend decision. So if the company decides to meet its expenses from its earnings, then it will have to pay like a fewer dividends to the shareholders. Why, tell me? Because see, out of the earnings, that is out of the profit, if the organization is able to meet its day-to-day obligations, do you think you can pay optimal amount of the rate of dividend to the shareholders? Obviously no. So it is something like on what I have borrowed, if I end up making, paying lots of amount in form of interest, principal amount, then where will I find the amount in order to pay for the shareholders, right? So it is always very important that a financial manager, he makes an optimal decision with respect to the financing, that is at the time of raising the funds, how wisely, how gently he is, raising the funds from which source, again that matters a lot. Fine. So the next step what you have is a liquidity funds. What does liquidity funds talk about? See, the cash position of a firm, it is definitely an important consideration, at the time of like paying dividend, because paying of a dividend means the cash flows, isn't it? Cash here, it is outflow, it is not inflow. Cash inflow, it talks about the profits. Cash outflow is where you are paying your interest, you are paying your dividend, where you are letting go of the cash from your hand, right? So a reputed a firm, of a company, like, it is generally liquid, and where it is able to pay the large amount of dividend, right? When you're able to make a lot of profits, obviously shareholders will demand, of course you will also pay them a very good amount of dividend. On the other hand, a growing firm, right, a developing firm in the growing stage, what does it do? They are going to face the problem of liquidity, where liquidity is something where it talks about quick or the easy convertibility of asset into cash, that is without loss on the conversion, isn't it? So again, it is very important to manage the liquidity funds in an organization, because it is going to directly impact the dividend decision of the organization. Well, moving to next point, it is a dividend a policy of a competitive concern. Now, what does dividend policy of competitive concerns talk about? See, if the other competitive concerns, they are paying the higher rate of dividend than the concern, the shareholders may prefer to invest their money in such companies. See, if a company is providing a very good amount of dividend, why will that person go for investing in B? Definitely no, they are going to look for the different opportunities available. If some company is paying absolutely well, then definitely that person is going to switch over to the company A, rather than staying in company B, isn't it? So investing in the concern is very, again, it's very important, and hence, every company, it has to decide, at the time of making the dividend a policy of the other competitive concerns in the market. The company has to study the different competitive concerns that are available in the prevailing competitive market. Then you have to go ahead with your dividend policy decision. Fine. The next step what you have is post dividend rates. What does it mean, post dividend rates? Say if the firm, like, it already exists, and the dividend rate, it may be decided on the basis of a dividends declared in the base year, that is in the previous year, right? It is always better, for the concern to maintain the stable rate of dividend, right? And it is going to, like, generally the directors will have to keep in the mind, the rate of dividend declared in the past. So on that, the past, the dividend which was declared, that acts as a base for the company in order to distribute the dividend, or to fix upon the rate of dividend that should be issued in the current year. So post dividend rates, of course, it is going to influence the particular dividend decision. Well, next up, what you have is the debt obligation. What does debt obligation talk about? See, a firm, which has incurred, like, heavy indebtedness is not in a position to pay the higher, the rate of dividends to shareholders. Like, earnings retention is really very, very important, for such kind of a concern. Whereas on the other hand, if you think, if the company has like no debt obligations, it can definitely afford to pay the higher rate of dividend. When you have your own set of obligations to meet of your organizations, do you think you can pay a good amount of dividend to your shareholders? Absolutely no. So what will be the impact on paying the dividend? Gradually it will go down, or else you will end up not paying only, right? So things are going to happen like that. Again, managing of debt obligation ideally is in the hands of financial manager. He has to take a gentle move with respect to financing, raising of sources, how he's going to manage between dividend and the retained earnings in the organization.